welcome to the podcast, Amazing Tales from Off the Beaten Path. I'm your host, Mike Allen. If you've ever driven through Waterbury on Interstate 84, I'm willing to bet you've seen it. Yes, it's that large white cross towering over a tall hill overlooking Connecticut's fifth largest city. Now, at night, you can't miss it. It projects its white light for miles. Well, behind that cross is the remnants of a religious theme park, Holy Land, USA, that used to draw tens of thousands of people a year. Well, here to tell us about the site's past and quite possibly a very exciting future is the rector of the Basilica of the Immaculate Conception in Waterbury, Father Jim Sullivan. Now, he's on the board of the nonprofit group that owns the site and is contemplating how to restore this unusual piece of Americana for the future. This week's trivia question, who is Henry Brialt? And why do a lot of people want to name a submarine after him? Stick around after the main program for the answer, because then you're going to know the topic for next week's show. Holy Land, USA. Now, if you've ever driven through western Connecticut on Interstate 84, particularly at night, you've undoubtedly seen the huge white cross on the hill overlooking downtown Waterbury. Now, if you're like me, you've been mostly content most of your life just to see the cross. And maybe, again, just like me, you've heard about Holy Land, USA, but never really taken the time to actually visit it. Well, after all, it is technically closed and has been for 40 years. But once you get to the site, you find that you can enter and stroll around, and what you see, the remnants of what was once a bustling religious theme park. Now, not a theme park like, roller coasters and Ferris wheels, but rather miniature structures designed to look like those in the Holy Land in the Middle East. And you can make your way to the top of that tall hill and see the cross up close. Well, Holy Land opened in 1956 after Waterbury lawyer John Greco developed the 17-acre site. It operated for 3 decades, drawing about 40,000 people a year to walk its grounds. It closed in 1984, and 2 years later, John Greco passed away. The land lay dormant for several decades, and as a result, Holy Land USA today is in pretty poor condition. It's suffered decades of weather damage and limited upkeep. But many of the original 200 structures are still standing, and their identifying names are still visible. And in 2013, the then mayor of Waterbury, Neil O'Leary, and a local car dealership owner, Fred Blasius, bought the site and created a nonprofit organization to make decisions about its future. Well, that nonprofit is managed by a board of directors, and one of its members is our guest today. He is the rector of the Basilica of the Immaculate Conception in downtown Waterbury, Father Jim Sullivan. So, Father Jim, I am so looking forward to talking to you about the Holy Land USA in Waterbury. Now, I'm as guilty as anybody else. I've lived in Connecticut more than 50 years. I've driven by that site, living in Danbury. I go I-84 up toward Hartford all the time, see the cross on top of the hill. And it wasn't until this last fall, several months ago, that I actually drove up to the site and saw what was there. And we're going to talk about this in just a second. I want to start off, though, by saying you are, as I understand it, grew up in Waterbury, if not a Waterbury native. And what did it mean to you personally, growing up and seeing that cross on that hill every day overlooking the city of Waterbury?
Yes, I grew up not too far from there. Route 8, of course, and 84 are both right near there. 225,000 cars pass by there every week. And I was in one of them regularly growing up as a child. You get so used to these landmarks that you don't actually think of it as something exceedingly special because you get so used to it. Kind of like someone living in Washington, D.C., I suppose, and looking at the Capitol, the Washington Monument. You just get so used to it. And so as I hit my 20s, I'd say, I began to have a deeper appreciation for it. But just all the prayers and the light and that it sheds upon the city. At one time, Waterbury, Connecticut was the most Catholic city in the United States per capita. Obviously, Philadelphia, Chicago, Los Angeles, Baltimore, LA had many more Catholics. But it was Waterbury, Connecticut that was the most per capita. We're talking about 70, 80, 100 years ago. And I was one of them. It was all the immigrants that came over at the Industrial Revolution and after, brass and copper capital of the world, which Waterbury is. I never lost appreciation for it as a teenager. I went up there once when I was 6 years old with two of my aunts from Australia who were visiting at the time. But in my 20s, I began to have a greater appreciation for it, what that cross really meant. And I think all the prayers that everyone, especially perhaps truck drivers, from what I hear, but all those who just pass by, a constant reminder of there's someone, something greater. So that's essentially the roots of my own affection for the cross on the hill, growing up maybe a mile and a half from there.
You know, when you go through Waterbury, there are two things everybody sees. One is that cross, and the other one, of course, is the Timex clock tower. And it's, sort of how Waterbury has gotten to be known by people at least driving through. And what struck me when I went up to the site was just how big that cross actually is. I didn't realize it when you're driving by. It doesn't look necessarily tremendously huge. It's 5 stories high. It's 56 feet high. And of course, it's now been converted, guess about 10, 15 years ago, to LED lights. And it's visible for miles, isn't it?
Yes, it is. So the original light had neon lights on the inside. It was kind of a joke that when the cross went on, all the other lights in Waterbury dimmed because it used so much electricity. And then there was, maybe 20 years ago, 20 something years ago, a new design that was stainless steel and had illumination from the outside, just shining on lights that were at the base of the cross, but nothing from the interior. And that one didn't work out very well. It was very, very faint. And then with LED technology back in 2013, our Mayor O'Leary, and a beautiful entrepreneur here in Waterbury, as well as philanthropist, more importantly, they purchased the land together back in 2013, and that same day immediately turned it into a foundation called Holy Land Waterbury USA. That cross was put up essentially at no cost. Contractors, friends, people donated the concrete, the steel, everything. And I think the only thing they had to pay for was the 50,000 LED lights that are in that cross. And you may notice it's primarily white liturgically in Catholic culture. White liturgically trumps every other color because it's the sign of hope. But other seasons have other liturgical colors. For example, Lent and Advent are sort of a purplish color. Red is for martyrdom, Good Friday. Yellow is gold. I'll usually have gold on Christmas Day and other times. But white is the primary color. But yes, it's illuminated with LED from the inside and can be seen so brilliantly from really all over.
It's similar in nature in that respect to the Empire State Building that changes its colors with different seasons and different events.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, for Breast Cancer Month, things like that. Yes.
Now, let's go back to the beginning of this. There was a Waterbury attorney named John Greco. What do we know about John? We know he developed it, at least that's what I know, but I'm sure you know a lot more about him. Fill us in.
So John Greco, as a young man, thought that the good Lord was calling him to be a priest. And I believe he actually entered seminary for 2 or 3 years. He determined that his call was different. He became an attorney. He was a very gracious attorney, also a philanthropist, and just felt the call by God to develop that land. And it was initially called Catholic Crusaders for Christ. He was short in stature, but big in his heart. It was never really, I would say, a state of the art, so to speak. It was a bunch of men with a great passion who put their bits of wood and plaster and whatever they could find to build Holy Land as a little replica of the Holy Land from Jerusalem as a place of pilgrimage. And so he dedicated so much of his life and his own finances to that place. And his legacy lives on. His niece, by the way, Rebecca Calabrese, is on our board, and she is kind of continuing the passion that her uncle had. But from what I understand, he was a saintly man, and he really wanted to do this not only for Catholics, he wanted to do this for all Christians, all people really of goodwill. And so he developed this very unique 17 and a half acre piece of property in the midst of a city that has a major highway going through for people to see. The primary attraction is, of course, the light. As you yourself said, Mike, you pass it how many times, as do so many people. But there were at the time 35 to 45,000 people a year going there on pilgrimage. Most of the people were like yourself and myself in my younger years, driving by, looking at the cross. That's the roots of John Greco.
So when you talk about the site itself and what they did with the plaster and the wood and whatnot, it's really unbelievable. I mean, there were at the time 200 different structures, as I understand it, and what are sort of described as religious dioramas from the life of Jesus and replicas of biblical sites in Bethlehem and Jerusalem. And I was trying to figure out how to try and describe this for listeners. It's almost like they took the holy spots from the Middle East and shrank them and put them in Waterbury, Connecticut, so people could understand just what this was like. I mean, the inn where Joseph and Mary went, that night and whatnot. I mean, everything's there. They have the chapel, the Stations of the Cross, replicas of catacombs. I mean, there's so much there. Was there ever anything that, as a child, when you went up there, that was sort of special and you wanted to see it the next time you went?
It's funny you should say that, Mike. The passion I have for that land right now, I just didn't. 6 years old was my only time there. And I'm kind of embarrassed to say the time after that when I went was in my 20s. And I actually wanted to join the board to help restore it. I was by far the youngest person on it at the time, never thinking at the moment I'd ever become a priest. That wasn't even on my radar screen. And nothing happened. And then again in 1995, another group of men get together. 100 people showed up at the meeting. I was one of them. This time we're going to restore it. This time it's going to happen. And nothing happened. Then, of course, it was purchased in 2013. I called the mayor at that time. I was just ordained a priest. And I said, Mayor, could we possibly have a mass on top of that hill? A mass had never been ever held up there since 1956. In the chapel, yes, for your listeners, there is a little chapel on the lower side, but nothing on the top of the mountain. But I was thinking an outdoor mass in honor of Father McGivney, who's the founder of the Knights of Columbus, who was born in the parish where I'm pastor, the Basilica of the Immaculate Conception, right in downtown. And he said, yes. So it was a pouring rainy day, of course. The weather didn't work out. But the Archbishop came, and we had about 1,200 people in the pouring rain on top of the mountain celebrating Mass. So for us, it was a sign that, you know what? I think something can happen here. There's still some life, there's some desire. We search very often in the wrong places for happiness, but in the core of every person is this desire for the infinite, desire for more. But we've kind of lost our way. And I think one of the things that can bring people back is this beautiful land in Waterbury, Connecticut, once called Holy Land, still called Holy Land, but I believe it has a future. And it's one of my excitements now. So to answer your question, as a young boy, it wasn't really there. Now as an adult, a priest, I have more of a passion now than I ever have. I feel it is my call personally to continue to see that something amazing happens up there.
Now, when you talk about the future of that site, I want to go back into your past because before you entered the priesthood, if I've done my research right, you were in the construction industry. And if I have that right, I'm assuming you look at that site with your construction eyes, or glasses on, and say, well, if we could just do this or if we could just do that.
You're absolutely right, Mike. Thank you. Yes, I've been ordained only 10 years. I'm 64 years old. I was ordained a priest at 53. I had a full career. My brother and I started a contracting business. We had 33 employees. We did hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of jobs over the years. Loved it. Loved to build. I believe that the human person is always called to continue to build spiritually, just advance, continue to grow, never become stagnant. Stagnancy is a poison to the spiritual life. It holds us back. So every vocation, every parish that I've had so far, I'm in my third in 10 years, has had a major construction project that was necessary. And so I suppose you're right. Lens, eyes, the good Lord has blessed me with that to be able to see in a certain way that other priests might not be able to see because of my past experience in building. So myself and a number of other men who are experienced in the trade, I suppose we are coming in with a different set of eyes and hopefully a dream and a vision as well to go along with the skills and the trades to see that this place has great potential. But yes, that was my background for the majority of my life. I tell the people I've sat in the pew with you for most of my life, and I'm on this side now on the altar only for the last 10.
Now, with Michael McGivney, let's go back to this for a second because, as you said, he was the founder of the Knights of Columbus. And Again, if I've done my research right, it's a two-step process to sainthood, and he has achieved the first step, beatification, but not yet canonized. And you think that may be coming, and if so, obviously, people would want to come to Waterbury to visit where he was born.
Exactly. Exactly. So I think I can say this safely. I know a lot more than I'm able to say, but this is public knowledge now that the second miracle, which is required for canonization, is already in Rome. It's an amazingly significant miracle that has happened. I won't say more than that right now, but I do happen to know a fair amount about that miracle. And please God, that canonization will happen soon. I think many people are hoping and praying for that. And you're right. If that happens, Waterbury becomes a place of pilgrimage. So the church that I'm now pastor of, the Basilica of the Immaculate Conception, right on the green in downtown, it's the most beautiful church just about anywhere. Not only here at the Basilica, but also Holy Land, because there's 2 million Knights of Columbus throughout the world. But Father McGivney, if he's canonized, your listeners may not know what this is, but he'll be the first American-born diocesan priest. A diocesan priest is like myself. You're a priest in a certain location, not belonging to a religious community, so to speak, but you're in a diocese. He'll be the first American-born diocesan priest to be canonized a saint, and right here in Waterbury, Connecticut. So we do believe that Waterbury will become a place of pilgrimage. You know, the old expression, if you build it, they will come. Well, you want to make sure if you do build it, they will come. So we're praying that all the pieces come together and that this is meant to be, that it does happen. But yes, I do believe that it could be a great place of pilgrimage. From the top of Holy Land, by the way, you can see all of where Father McGivney's life was, where he was born, where he worked in the spoon factory at the age of 13, where he went to school, where he worshiped, and where he was laid to rest on the other side of the mountain for 92 years before his body was moved to New Haven, Connecticut, where it lays in state right now.
Father McGivney was born in Waterbury in 1852. He died from pneumonia in 1890 at the age of just 38. Like many in Waterbury, he was an immigrant from Europe, and he practiced Catholicism as a youth and later joined the priesthood. He saw the difficulties that families had during the Industrial Revolution when the main breadwinner passed away at a young age, leaving a widow and children with nobody to fend for them. It was this observation that led Father McGivney to form the Knights of Columbus to lend a hand to families in need. Today, it's the largest fraternal organization in the world associated with the Catholic Church. Well, that wraps up this episode of Amazing Tales from Off the Beaten Path. When you go to Holy Land, do take the time to climb to the top of the hill where the huge cross is located. The view from the top of that hill is absolutely inspirational. I want to thank our guest for today's program, Father Jim Sullivan, rector of the Basilica of the Immaculate Conception in Waterbury. The answer to this week's trivia question, the question was, who is Henry Briault, and why do a lot of people want to name a submarine after him? Well, the answer is Henry Briault is the only enlisted submarine sailor in the history of the U.S. Navy to have won the National Medal of Honor. Next week on Amazing Tales, we're going to tell you about the extraordinarily heroic exploits of Henry Briault and what's being done to get his name on the side of a Navy submarine. Amazing Tales from Off the Beaten Path is a production of True North Associates, LLC. This is Mike Allen. Be safe and please stay healthy.